There are a lot of stories in American history that need to be told. Today, we're going to talk about one of them. Hi there, I'm Library Lynn, and I make knowing about great nonfiction my mission. Don't know what to read next? I always have ideas. Just to be clear, I tend to be a backlist reader with an occasional newish book thrown in. I seldom discuss books I don't care for, but if it's a controversial book, I'll give my opinion. You're always free to disagree with me. Today, we're going to talk about Blood Done Sign My Name by Timothy B. Tyson. We'll cover the three main points I learned from the book, and I'll let you know what I liked least and what I liked best about it. And stay tuned to the end for the number one life lesson I got from the book. The title, Blood Done Sign My Name, comes from an old African American hymn, and I'm going to go ahead and give you a trigger warning right now. This book is filled with brutal violence, and it also has a lot of language that some people will find very objectionable. I don't use any of that in my review, but you may want to keep that into consideration if you think about reading the book. The first part of this book is so shocking that I'm not going to read it. Even the first sentence is completely shocking. So I'm going to start with the second paragraph at the beginning of the book. I was stunned and bewildered as if Gerald had informed me that his family had fried up their house cat and eaten it for breakfast. We did not use that word at our house. It was not that I had never heard it or had never used it myself, but somehow the children of my family knew that to utter that word in the presence of my father would be to say goodbye to this earthly life. My daddy was a Methodist minister. An Eleanor Roosevelt liberal, he called himself in later years, and at our house, that word was not just naughty, like hell or damn, it was evil, like taking the Lord's name in vain, maybe even worse. And now my friend Gerald was using it while talking about his daddy and his brothers killing a man. Timothy B. Tyson grew up in North Carolina, and as he said, he's the son of a Methodist minister. And his father's father and grandfather were also preachers and tobacco farmers. After the events he describes in this book, Tyson's family had to move to Wilmington, where he spent his teenage years, and he later became a professor of African American history. The three main things I learned from the book. Number one, there's no sugarcoating the ugliness of this crime. It was brutal, by any account, inexcusable. In 1970, when he was 10 years old, Tyson's friend told him that his father and brothers had killed a black man named Henry Morrow, who went by the name of Dickie. Morrow was a Vietnam vet who had finished his tour of duty. He had entered the store of the Teal family to buy a Pepsi for a woman who had helped raise him, who was unable to walk, laid up on the couch, as she put it. One of Teal's sons claimed that Dickie made a suggestive comment to his 19-year-old wife. As a result, the father and two sons chased him out of the store, beat him, and shot him as he begged for his life, and all in front of onlookers. The Teal family were charged, but the white jury returned the verdict, not guilty. So those are the facts of the case. What happened afterwards? The black community fought back. That's the second thing I learned. Local pastors organized marches, especially after Morrow's funeral, and one march went all the way from Oxford to North Carolina's state capital in Raleigh. This was in 1970, and in the wake of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, frustrated young black people were joining the Black Power movement, and some of these leaders came to town. Factories and businesses were dynamite and set on fire. It almost tore Oxford apart. One of the people who participated in these protests was a man named Eddie McCoy, and when Tyson went back and interviewed him years after the crime, this is what he had to say. In the years since the freedom movement ended, the memory of what had been required of the people faded, McCoy explained to me, and people no longer appreciated the sacrifices that had been made regardless of methods. I was doing that stuff back then, sit-ins and marches and all the rest. And nowadays, nobody even knows what it was like. People right now think the white man opened up his drugstore and said, "Y'all come on in now, integration done come." But every time a door opened, somebody was kicked in the butt. Somebody was knocked down and refused and spit on before you went in them places. It wasn't no non-violence in Oxford. Somebody was bruised and kicked and knocked around, you better believe it. You didn't get it for free. The third thing that I learned from the book was that the white church community that Tyson's father served was not sympathetic to the outrage of the black community. They didn't want Tyson's father to even discuss the events that were happening, and when he invited a black minister to speak at his church, the family began to receive death threats. Ultimately, the church voted to let Tyson's father go as pastor, and the family moved to Wilmington, North Carolina. What I liked best about this book: Tyson tells the story as it happened. This is not a screed against all white people. People are mixtures of good and bad. He makes it clear that this is not a case of just evil people against good people, but of real people making choices that have profound consequences. What I liked least about the book is, well, this is part history and part memoir. And while it was interesting, I found some of the stories a little too detailed. Some of the information about Tyson separating from his father and his anger over the events as a young man, for instance, seemed to take some of the air out of the original story. But I can see why it was necessary, because it helps explain how and why Tyson came to write the book, and why ultimately, as a white man, he became a professor of African American history. Blood Done Sign My Name was published in 2004. So he's speaking from a vantage point of nearly 2 decades ago. Near the end of the book, Tyson sums up why he thought this story needed to be told. We cannot address the place we find ourselves because we will not acknowledge the road that brought us here. Our failure to confront the historical truth about how African Americans finally won their freedom presents a major obstacle to genuine racial reconciliation. In some instances, white people rose to the call of conscience, though only a handful followed their conviction into the streets. More often, what grabbed white America's attention was the chaos in those streets and the threat of race war. The federal government intervened in domestic racial politics in the end because segregation had become a threat to American foreign policy and domestic stability. Most whites and many middle-class blacks recoiled in fear of these changes and huddled in the suburbs of their own indifference. The civil rights movement knocked down the formal and legal barriers to equal citizenship, but it failed to give most African Americans real power in this society. So here's the main lesson I got. We all need to examine ourselves for racism. It's possible we all harbor some. I'm not sure from where, but I've heard racism defined as believing a group of people, based on where they grew up or the color of their skin or even their religion, is a mark of inferiority to your own. And that sounds about right to me. We all have to examine ourselves for it. As Martin Luther King said in his I Have a Dream speech, and I'm paraphrasing here, people should be judged not for the color of their skin, but for the content of their character. And what reveals our character is not so much our words as our actions. So those are my thoughts on Blood Done Sign My Name. Other books by Timothy B. Tyson include Radio Free Dixie, Robert F. Williams and the Roots of Black Power, and The Blood of Emmett Till. For more worthwhile nonfiction books to read, hit like and subscribe so you'll always have fresh ideas. And if you would like really great books at your fingertips, check out my book, Library Lens Curated Collection of Superlative Nonfiction. Here you will find an entire library's worth of recommended books on every topic, arranged by Dewey Decimal Classification System, just like in a public library. You will find links to Blood Done Sign My Name and my book in the description box below. If you use my link, I will get a small commission from your purchase, which I would appreciate because it really helps me out. And finally, share this video with your book-loving family and friends. Until next time, happy reading.